I was in the 6th grade, I was pretty good friends with the rich kid at my school. Let's call him Robbie. Now I know the rich kids are supposed to be spoiled brats and all that, but Robbie was actually pretty nice. We would trade Yu-Gi-Oh cards at school, talk about GameCube games. Everyone knew he was rich because he always wore really nice clothes, and his mom would drop him off in the morning driving an Escalade. But when Robbie eventually invited me over for a play date, I got to see just how rich he really was. My mom gasped when we arrived at his house. I had printed out the directions on MapQuest. Yes, this was back in 2003. Because his house was in the middle of nowhere. It was surrounded by trees, and it looked like it was half house, half castle. Seriously, there was a stone turret on one side. It wasn't like one of those new McMansions, though. It looked like it was an old house. My mom dropped me off and said she'd be back in a few hours. Robbie answered the door and took me down into his basement, which he called the game room. My jaw dropped. His basement had been converted to look like the inside of a movie theater. There were rows of old seats and a projector in the back, facing a huge white screen in the front. I tried to play it cool and not seem too amazed, but compared to the little CRT I had in my attic, this was a whole new galaxy of awesome. Robbie opened an old armoire next to the projector and revealed the mother lode. As I mentioned earlier, we would talk a lot about GameCube games. GameCube was the only console I had, and I just assumed it was the only one he had too. Well, organized on the different shelves of the armoire were a GameCube, an Xbox, and a PlayStation 2, with plenty of games for each. To my 6th grade mind, that was even more impressive than the Castle House. Anyway, we made some popcorn, got some Capri Suns, and played Halo on his Xbox, which I had never played before. Heck, I'd never even played an M-rated game. Before I knew it, it was late in the afternoon, and my mom was supposed to be coming to pick me up. "Oh, no way," Robbie insisted. "Just sleep over. We can order a pizza." "You think that would be okay?" I asked. "Well, sure," he laughed. "I'll tell my mom to call you, Mom." As luck would have it, I got the okay from my parents. Robbie and I ordered a pizza, drank a ton of Capri Suns, and stayed up late. Eventually, Robbie went and got some sleeping bags from upstairs, and we set them up in the basement. "Your house is really cool," I told him. "Thanks," he said. "The setup is pretty sweet, but to be honest, the house kind of gives me the creeps." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, it's an old house, and sometimes I think it might be haunted. I hear weird stuff mostly. Sometimes I hear footsteps, even when I'm home alone." "Really?" "Yeah. Just last weekend my dad was out of town and my mom was showing a house. I was down here actually, and I heard walking upstairs, but walking really slowly. I listened for a second and then it stopped. I told my parents about it, but they just say that old houses make weird sounds sometimes. Maybe they're right." "Yeah," I chuckled half-heartedly. Anyway, we played maybe another match or two of Halo and then fell asleep. I rolled over in my sleeping bag and tried to overcome the creeping feeling of dread that had found its way into my thoughts. Earlier, I had been so preoccupied with the big house, the video games. It had all seemed so wondrous. But now, after hearing Robbie's story, the mansion was starting to feel a little bit creepy. As I lay there, doing my best to quell that creeping feeling, I noticed another feeling, one that would be a little more difficult to quell. All of those Capri Suns had finally got to me, and the call of nature could not be ignored. Earlier that evening, Robbie had told me that the bathroom in the basement was being remodeled, and so the toilet wasn't working. I'd have to go upstairs. As much as I dreaded walking through the creepy mansion in the middle of the night, I didn't want to risk my friendship with Robbie by peeing in one of his sleeping bags. And so, I crept upstairs. The nearest bathroom was connected to the kitchen, which was right at the top of the stairs. The kitchen was absolutely massive, with tall glass windows on 2 sides. These looked out onto a wooden deck, and then the woods beyond. There were some security lights or something on because I remember a cold glow cast across the deck and spilling onto the trees. Light fell in through the windows as well, throwing eerie shadows with harsh angles into the kitchen, like I was stuck in an old silent horror film or something. I had just finished using the bathroom when I heard Robbie walking in the kitchen. I figured he must have heard me go upstairs and had decided to come up and grab some of our leftover pizza. I walked out into the darkness of the kitchen, expecting to see him over by the fridge. What I saw instead turned my stomach upside down. I have never seen anything like it before or since. Over by the tall glass windows was a man. At least that's what I saw at first, a man. But it was actually a suit, like an old three-piece suit, floating. It seemed to be full, as if someone were wearing it, but I couldn't see anyone inside. No head, no hands, no feet. It moved from right to left, almost gliding, about a foot off the ground. In the horror movies, people tend to scream when they see something terrifying. In that moment, my mind truly couldn't even process what I was seeing. I didn't even think to scream. I just stood there dumbfounded, my stomach twisted in a horrible knot. Even though it didn't have any feet, I heard the sound of footsteps coming from the ground beneath it. It continued floating to the left, past the windows, and into the connected dining room. The second the ghost, or whatever it was, left the kitchen, my instincts snapped back like a rubber band. I sprinted across the kitchen and back down the basement stairs. Robbie woke up as I jumped back into my sleeping bag. "What's going on?" he asked. I thought for a moment. Nothing," I said. I could barely explain what I'd seen to myself, much less anyone else. Plus, Robbie had to live in this house. Telling him what I had seen would only freak him out even more. I decided to keep it to myself, and we both went back to sleep. I had never really believed in ghosts before that night. I'm not sure I do now. All I know is that I saw something that defied explanation. It's up to you if you want to believe me. Just know that I couldn't have made up something that strange, even if I had wanted to. Robbie and I remained friends until he transferred schools 2 years later. I'd ask him every once in a while if he'd had any more strange experiences in the house. He'd mention more footsteps or the occasional strange banging or pipes clanging, but as far as I know, he never saw anything like that bizarre entity in the kitchen. I haven't talked to him in a little while, actually. Maybe I should get in touch and see how he's doing. One thing's for sure, though. If he asks me to come hang out at his place, I won't be sleeping over. Another scary story indeed. Have you ever seen a strange, otherworldly apparition? Well, apart from me, of course. Now, it's best you leave, but do come back and see me again sometime soon. It's nice having company around to liven things up.